Happy Thanksgiving month, everybody, and Tony here with my review of the third Lord of the Rings movie, The Return of the King, which I saw 2 days ago at the Cinesta Kubex am Alexanderplatz, and which had its initial premiere on December 1, 2003 at the Embassy Theatre in Wellington, New Zealand, and had its American premiere on December 17, 2003, and its entire New Zealand premiere on December 18, 2003. This was directed, written, and produced by Peter Jackson. It was based on J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of the King. It was co-written by Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens. It was co-produced by Barry M. Osborne and Fran Walsh. The cinematography was done by Andrew Lesney. It was edited by Jamie Selkirk. The music was composed by Howard Shore, and it starred the talents of Elijah Wood, Sean Astin, Ian McKellen, Christopher Lee, Brad Dourif, Andy Serkis, Billy Boyd, Dominic Monaghan, Viggo Mortensen, John Rhys-Davies, Orlando Bloom, Bernard Hill, Miranda Otto, Carl Urban, John Noble, Sean Bean, David Wenham, Hugo Weaving, Liv Tyler, Marton Chokas, Kate Blanchett, Ian Holm, Lawrence Makuwara, Craig Parker, Thomas Robbins, and Bruce Spence. This was the crowning glory of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. On top of that, this was also, in my opinion, one of the greatest, if not one of the best films I have ever seen back in 2003. If you have seen my review of Rugrats Go Wild, I argued that 2003 was not really a great year for movies because there were some stinkers like this, and even to some extent Daddy Daycare, but there were also some excellent films such as The Lord of the Rings Return of the King, as well as Finding Nemo. So with Lord of the Rings Return of the King, this was a film that I remember thoroughly loving because of the much more epic scale, how everything was coming together in such a grandiose sense of harmony, and just that overall finite feeling that I felt, not only for all the characters involved, but in terms of how everything came together from the first and the second movies. Story-wise, this culminates the overall trilogy of The Lord of the Rings. We see our heroes at their very zenith in terms of what their ultimate fate is going to be. On top of that, given its title, The Return of the King, this also marks Aragorn's ascent to being the king, instead of just roaming around as a ranger like he has been for many years. Therefore, this film is also about one of the heroes, Aragorn, taking his place as the new king of Middle-earth in the hopes of bringing peace to the entire land, as well as stopping the oppression that the orcs have been constantly showering on the elves, the dwarves, and all the human beings, thus using Aragorn as the catalyst to bring in that unity. Speaking of catalysts, this also marks a more complex situation that Frodo, Sam, and Gollum/Smeagol find themselves in, especially where the ring is involved. The power of the ring continues to be such a huge source of contention, not only for Frodo, but for Gollum's/Smeagol's growing lust for it after what happened to Smeagol in the second film, and even perceiving Sam as a threat because Smeagol/Gollum has been fully aware that Sam not only wants to protect Frodo, but is already suspicious of his true evil and selfish intentions. Therefore, The Return of the King is a huge culmination from everything that has occurred from movies 1 to 2. The only caveat that I had was Saruman's death, and I know that it's a bit on the spoiler-y territory, but for those of you who have come to this video, you've been quite warned if you haven't seen this film. Saruman is supposed to be presented as this all-powerful wizard, But how he dies here is kind of anticlimactic. Here, Saruman dies not through a huge epic final battle, but after constantly berating Grima, Grima ends up stabbing him to death, and Saruman falls to his death on the spike of the water wheel. As for Grima, he ends up getting shot by one of Legolas's arrows. While it did seem rather anticlimactic to me, I could kind of understand that Saruman is not the total big bad of this entire movie, but it's actually both the powers of Sauron as well as Sauron's influence on the all-powerful ring. And it also shows that there is the much greater evil of Sauron and the ring that affects everybody and the fate of the world as a whole. But suffice it to say, everything has managed to wrap up amazingly well after all of that tension, action, drama, and thrills. Even Pippin and Merry get a whole lot more to do and contribute extremely handsomely to the final battle, which also juxtaposes with Frodo's and Sam's internal battle of the ring's overall influence on the former, as well as Gollum's / Smeagol's greed and covetousness of wanting and desiring that ring. I would even compare The Return of the King to Götterdämmerung, or the Twilight of the Gods, in which it is the final stretch for all the characters involved, and especially in terms of how the ring manages to be defeated. And if you've seen both The Return of the King as well as Götterdämmerung in terms of how the ring is defeated, you'll probably be aware of it. But let's just say that it involves a lot of conflagration, as in a lot of eviscerating fire, and there's a lot of heat involved. So when all is said and done, The Return of the King was an excellent finale to the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. Every character managed to contribute something superbly to the plot and story as a whole. Everything managed to be on such a grandiose scale, and the ending, while tear-jerking and almost left me feeling kind of heart-wrenched on the inside, was really satisfying and brought me a huge smile on my face, knowing that everything has been resolved and everything has managed to come at a conclusion that sums up everything that was full of that tension and excitement from not only the first two films, but also from The Return of the King as a whole. The cinematography continues to be excellent, whether it be the locations, or all of the special effects, or even a great deal of the magical effects, as well as all of the location shots and how each of the fight scenes were shot. Everything was masterfully shot from beginning to end, and it managed to leave such a hugely strong impression on me, much like how the first two films mastered cinematography. So you really have to hand it to Peter Jackson, Andrew Lesnie, and Jamie Selkirk, among many of the people involved with the production, as well as the cinematography and editing, to really deliver on the goods of this epic conclusion. And I use it in the best possible way, because that was what the cinematography felt like. It was one epic roller coaster ride that made me thoroughly breathless at everything that occurred, and do so in a way that managed to make me smile with glee as well as with utter excitement. The music continues to be excellently done, as Howard Shore's compositions manage to make me, as the listener and the viewer, totally engaged with what the characters are getting themselves into, as well as the overall conclusion and the overall denouement and thrills that I managed to acquire from the Return of the King, whether they be in some of the quieter moments or the more majestic moments, or even those moments that left me at the edge of my seat. Everything about Howard Shore's composition managed to be a huge plus in my eyes, as well as the credits song sung by Annie Lennox. She managed to use her superb mezzo/contralto voice to such a beautifully well-timed and well-sung extreme that I was thoroughly engaged with her final credits song, and she did a beautiful job in making her voice just soar so exceptionally well. The characters continue to be just as strong as they've always been, but before I get to the main heroes, a few words about Gollum/Smeagol during the prologue of the final film. Yes, Smeagol did start off as someone who seems rather mischievous and wide-eyed and has this really brotherly relationship with his cousin Deagle, but once he ends up being seduced by the ring's power after Deagle finds it, he ends up consumed by it and even kills him in cold blood by strangling him before coveting the ring for himself and becoming a lot more consumed by the ring. So what I've recognized about Smeagol in his prime is that Smeagol and Deagle's story almost reminds me of Fafnir's and Fazol's story, in which both of them are of similar species, but the thing is that Fafnir and Fazold are brothers who are giants, whereas with Smeagol and Deagle, they were both hobbits, but were cousins. And both sets of familial characters ended up being pawns to the ring to the point of death, in which Fafnir kills Fasold after coveting the ring and the gold as a whole, even after they've returned Freya, the goddess of love and beauty, to the gods of Valhalla. And with Smeagol and Deagle, Deagle ends up being totally seduced by the ring and only wants it for himself, but Smeagol's curiosity of the ring overpowers him to the point where he covets it and ends up strangling Deagle to death and ends up taking it with him all for his own and just being thoroughly consumed by it, and ends up the more disheveled, underfed cretin that he turned out to be. So with Smeagol's and Deagle's backstory, it's pretty much akin to Fafnir and Fasold, but in Smeagol's case, once he ends up having the ring, he ends up being a combination of Alberich in Gollum's side and Smeagol, his normal side, almost akin to Mime, in which Gollum is the bullying Alberich to Smeagol's more meek yet crafty Mime, and who's also just as manipulative. Going to the main film, Smeagol has been totally consumed by not only coveting the ring, but also succumbing to Gollum's darker sides. He's even willing to betray Frodo so that he can finally attain the ring for himself, especially when he ends up having him involved in a lot of death-defying situations that nearly cost him his life. So this time, Smeagol, let alone Gollum, have been completely consumed by darkness, evil, and malicious intentions to the point where they do want both Frodo and Sam dead so that they could have their precious ring back, thus making Smeagol and Gollum thoroughly villainous in their actions and intentions. Frodo continues to find himself conflicted with the ring and its power because of how much it ends up consuming him. In fact, Frodo's whole fascination with the ring also mirrors what happened to Smeagol when he ends up becoming so fascinated and so obsessed with it to the point where he ends up discarding his purity and his innocence to become this grotesque and unsightly creature. With Frodo, there is that fear that he might end up succumbing to the same fate that Smeagol did and would have ended up demorphing into Gollum. So there is that constantly internal battle that Frodo still finds himself in terms of whether he is going to be suckered in by the ring's power and by the ring's overall influence on him, and should he end up losing his overall humanity because of it. This is something that not only frightens him continuously, but also challenges him to find out if he really still has that purity of heart to do away with this all-powerful ring and come to his senses. Even Sam finds himself on the precipice of nearly losing Frodo and tries his damnedest to want him not only back to his senses, but also trying to never forget about the innocence and the purity that he has as his best friend for life. Sam continues to fight tooth and nail for Frodo, not only as his best friend, but also as his companion in battle against the evils that the ring has been poisoning on Frodo. And his growing suspicion of Smeagol or Gollum wanting to kill both him and Frodo to attain the ring are just as thoroughly justified, considering how much he ends up risking his neck to save Frodo, as well as strengthen his resolve, courage, and valor to ensure that his friend is well protected and well shielded from all danger and peril. Gandalf the White maintains his position as a mentor figure to his younger charges, but also proves himself to be an effective leader as well as a wise and strong warrior who never disappoints. He does his best to keep his team together, and he also continues to prove himself to be a formidable warrior wizard with not only his mastery of magic, but also his combat prowess with his staff and his sword, thus showing that he was always a formidable warrior wizard. Although I did have a bit of an issue of how Saruman's demise was, at least it kind of showed me right there that Saruman was not necessarily the overall big bad of the story, even though he is still one of the big bads who is still very villainous in his intentions as well as in his goals to rule the world and continue to dedicate himself to Sauron. At least he demonstrates that his powers over Gandalf as well as everybody else ends up being dissipated once he ends up losing the trust of his lackey, Grima. And his death also shows that there was much bigger fish to fry, especially where Sauron is concerned. Grima also shows that while he still wants power, he also wants it done his way once he finds out that Saruman has been constantly berating him and only sees him as nothing more than his pawn, thus making him strike with a vengeance against his master. Pippin and Merry have definitely grown from being sweet and lovable comedic reliefs to proving themselves to be just as apt in defending Middle-earth, let alone Rohan, from harm, as well as fighting for the good of the humans, the elves, the hobbits, and the dwarves. Pippin has grown in upright valiance in terms of never letting his values be compromised, even when he is under King Denethor's thumb. And Merry also proves himself to be just as reliable as a fighter, and even using his sword well, especially when he accompanies Éowyn into battle. Therefore, while Pippin and Merry continue to be absolutely lovable and charming, and absolutely sweet as comedic reliefs, they've also proven themselves to be formidable warriors never to be underestimated on. They fight for what's right and just, and have the right hearts to boot. As I mentioned before, this is Aragorn's big moment. After several years of roaming the earth as a rogue ranger, constantly in the heat of battle, and constantly distancing himself from Isildur's legacy that was otherwise controversial and quite dirty. He ends up accepting his fate as the new warrior king and even proves himself to be a strong leader as well as an equally strong warrior, constantly ensures the safety and well-being of his people, and also proves that he is willing to risk his own life to save all of his people. Gimli continues to be an extremely lovable rogue and also continues to exhibit some really awesome fighting skills. My favorite moment with Gimli has to be his drinking contest with Legolas, in which he ends up totally smashed and passed out from all of that mead and beer that he drank, thus showing how much of a lovable rogue and ruffian that Gimli was, even when he's having a great time with his drinking contests. But in all seriousness, Gimli continues to be a loyal friend to Aragorn and an equally loyal friend to Legolas, thus ensuring that they manage to stay strong together. Speaking of Legolas, he continues to be as charismatic and charming as he's always been. He still continues to carry himself like the fine elfin prince that he is, and does so with charm, allure, and a whole bunch of handsomeness that makes him rival many a fairy tale prince. Even his drinking game with Gimli was fun, considering how cool, calm, and collected Legolas is, even when he ends up drinking a whole ton of alcoholic drinks. That is just how awesome Legolas is, not only as an archer, but also as an overall character. King Theoden is at an all-time high as a warrior king, proving himself to be in absolute charge of his people and his army in defending Rohan against the orcs and different invaders. He continues to grow in formidability as a king as well as an overall individual. Eowyn also continues to grow as a warrior princess, not bowing down to anybody who tells her that she can't fight in battle. She manages to defy whatever orders her uncle tells her, and does so in a way that makes her stand out superbly. And she even takes Merry on for the ride because she could see a whole lot of potential in him. She's even willing to have him accompany her in the final battle against the orcs, as well as good triumphing over evil. Eomer continues to be as formidable of a warrior as he's always been, and also shows that he is just as loyal and faithful to his comrades and his family, thus clearly demonstrating how stout-hearted he is, not only as a prince, but also as a warrior who happens to fight for the good of his people. Denethor presents himself to be a lot more unhinged psychologically, as he constantly berates Faramir for not equating to Boromir's strength. And it's clear to see that his favoritism of Boromir as the eldest son will have dire consequences on this nobleman if he does not change his ways, but it seems like he is more fixated on the memory of Boromir instead of thoroughly accepting Faramir as the only surviving son, even to the point where he ends up nearly losing his mind if something happened to Faramir. Boromir continues to serve as a memory, not only in terms of his contributions in battle, but also as a shadow of how much Denethor prefers his eldest son to his younger son. In fact, I would even like to mention that Denethor's relationship between him and his sons is almost akin to King Lear's relationship with himself and his daughters. Denethor, like King Lear, is a lot more attracted to the outwardliness of his older children's deeds than the more subtle and unconditionally loving action of his younger child, thus making the relationship between Denethor and his two sons a very strained one. And speaking of strained, yes, Faramir continues to seek for his father's approval, which is almost like continuously searching for a needle in a haystack. Nevertheless, he still proves himself to be a strong warrior who remains faithful to his warrior code and is just as willing to fight by his comrade's side. Elrond also serves as a catalyst to how Aragorn's final fate was going to be. Once Elrond finds the broken sword from many years ago to be given to Aragorn, he ends up having it forged, thus giving the forged sword to Aragorn as his personal heirloom to ascend the throne that he was destined for. In fact, Elrond retrieving the broken pieces of the sword and having it forged is akin to what has happened with Sigmund and Notung and having it broken from his battle with Hunding and having Wotan and Hunding fatally kill him before Brunhilde retrieves the broken pieces of the sword and giving it to Sieglinde and having it be reforged for her son Siegfried for him to obtain it. That is another parallel that I have seen from the Ring of the Nibelungs with the Lord of the Rings. The sword being reforged so that a new hero can come and save the world from total annihilation. In fact, Aragorn has become akin to Siegfried obtaining Notung after it was once initially destroyed by Wotan and Hunding when Sigmund once wielded it, almost akin to how Isildur wielded the sword before it was destroyed in his final battle. Thus, Elrond continues to exercise noble strength as well as serving as a catalyst of determination for Aragorn to finally accept his fate and ascend the throne as the new king. Arwen continues to be a loyal and faithful soul to Aragorn, not wanting to give him up even if it costs her life. She knows the consequences of what will happen to her if she ends up going to the mortal world instead of continuing to travel with her elfin folk. But her heart remains with Aragorn and will constantly fight to ensure that she remains united with him until the end of time. Celeborn continues to be a noble presence in the entire story, but it's once again Galadriel who continues to have the lion's share of her contribution to the main heroes, even when Frodo is at his darkest moment. The reminder of the flask containing a liquid that lights up serves as a memento for him to stay safe from all peril. Even when Frodo is at his lowest, Galadriel's spirit helps him to continuously fight and never give up until the job of discarding that all-powerful ring is done. Bilbo also contributes well in terms of how everything has come full circle. The Witch King of Angmar is a threatening presence to the main heroes, constantly looming with terror and horror once he wants to take over the world and rule it in darkness. That is just how terrifying of a villain this big bad is, even in the final battle where everything might seem dire, but he also serves as the final challenge for all the heroes involved in this battle against good and evil to overcome. Even Gothmog, one of the commanders of the orc army, also serves as an intimidating and horrifying presence to show that they mean business when it comes to taking over Middle-earth and wanting it for themselves. And the Mouth of Sauron also serves as another big bad that all the heroes must overcome. So the characters showed a lot of strength in various ways. From the minute all the way up to the grandiose, all the characters provided a lot of tension, action, and a whole lot of thrills to make this conclusion all the more fully realized and a lot stronger. Everybody from the heroes to the villains to the anti-heroes served a purpose, and did so with aplomb. The same thing I can say about the acting. Elijah Wood managed to give a thoroughly strong performance as Frodo, whether he be on his low days or even on his days where he has to really go all out and finally find the courage to see that this ring, this all-powerful ring, is corrupting him, and he's constantly wrestled with this whole fate that bears down upon him. Nonetheless, he still has to carry through with this final journey, even if it means sacrificing his own life. And Elijah Wood managed to capture those nuances extremely well. Same goes for Sean Astin. He too continued to be a thoroughly reliable actor as Sam, thus showing how superbly he can not only play up the loyalty that Sam has toward Frodo, but also inject him with a lot of charisma, valiance, strength, and bravery, thus showing how much of a good friend and a great ally, as well as a great fighter, Sam can be even in the most dire of situations. Ian McKellen has continued to grow in strength, majesty, and magnificence as Gandalf, thus showing how well he was able to play up both his wise mentor persona as well as his warrior wizard persona, who is not afraid to throw down when the chips are down. Christopher Lee as Saruman continues to be an intimidating presence and does so with his trademark bass baritone voice that was awesomely resonant and thoroughly chilling, even to the point where I saluted him for everything that he had to offer as Saruman, and he also made the best out of his final moments. Brad Dourif continues to be thoroughly grotesque, yet absolutely entertaining as Grima, complete with his sleazy, slimy nature, thus making Grima a character I continue to love to hate, yet also find something oddly charming about him to the point where I totally saluted him for everything that he's accomplished. Andy Serkis indubitably stole the show, thus using a lot of nuance and a whole lot of engagement to make the juxtaposition of Smeagol's childish innocence and Gollum's malicious intent, complete with wanting to murder both Sam and Frodo, all the more fully realized. And Andy Serkis was a master of his craft and a total champion of what he was able to accomplish in emphasizing the duality that Smeagol and Gollum are defined by. Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan also did amazingly in making Pippin and Merry not only absolutely lovely, but also grow in heroism and valiance. Viggo Mortensen continues to grow with heroism, valiance, and strength as Aragorn. He continues to exude that dark yet mysterious charisma about him, but also back it up with valiance, great bravery, and a whole bunch of strength about Aragorn, to the point where I was in total awe with everything he had to offer as an all-time hero who is about to ascend into his reign as future king. John Rhys-Davies continues to be absolutely lovable as both Gimli and Treebeard, thus using that roguishness that made Gimli all the more charming, as well as that strength that Treebeard has, with both characters oozing with virile, gruff, and absolutely amazing charm. Orlando Bloom continues to be just as dashing and handsome as Legolas, thus showing how well he can play up glamour, handsomeness, and princely dashingness to make Legolas a thoroughly realized character, and not just another character that fanboys and fangirls alike would love to ogle to. Bernard Hill continues to exude nobility and strength as King Theoden, all thanks to his handsome screen presence that is full of strong commands and a lot of regality. Miranda Otto continues to be as elegant and beautiful as Éowyn, thus making her a thoroughly charismatic and thoroughly strong warrior princess with everything that she's got. And I dare not forget about how adorable Éowyn's chemistry is with Faramir. Sure, some people might complain that it was kind of thrown in there, but I still defend it as Faramir and Éowyn finding happiness with each other, even when things get quite dire between them. And Miranda Otto's charm and regal beauty as Éowyn made her characterization work. Karl Urban as Éomer continues to embody his character with warlike strength and a whole lot of formidability, and on top of that, great handsomeness to make his character a thoroughly welcome one to witness on screen. John Noble as Denethor managed to combine that strength that he has as a nobleman, as well as the paranoia that he has about losing Boromir to death, and makes him a thoroughly engaging character that I not only feel annoyed with, but also kind of like to hate because of how much his favoritism ended up consuming Denethor. And John Noble's characterization of this nobleman made him an absolutely great actor to witness. Sean Bean's moments as Boromir, even when he appears to Denethor as a ghost, still makes him a welcomely strong presence on screen, especially backed up by his virile charisma. David Wenham's warlike charm and manly charisma continues to make Faramir a thoroughly engaging character, and also makes him a thoroughly engaging actor to watch on screen, all thanks to his virile charisma and how much strength he was able to exude on screen. Hugo Weaving was stoic nobility and virile regality incarnate as Elrond, as he's always been from the first two films until now. He continues to radiate with awesome regality and do so with charisma and a whole lot of involvement. Liv Tyler as Arwen continues to grow in elegance, stateliness, and beauty to the point where I continue to be thoroughly engaged with her story, as well as how much she yearns for Aragorn to return to her and to her love for him. That is just how much Liv Tyler made me feel for Arwen, whether they be in her moments of sadness or her moments of joy, or even the prospects that she has for Aragorn in terms of wanting a great future with him. Marton Chokas continues to radiate with virile nobility and elegant strength as Celeborn. Cate Blanchett continues to be a gorgeous on-screen presence as Galadriel, even to the point where I continue to be mesmerized by how awesomely, regally beautiful Galadriel was as an elfin queen. And Cate Blanchett managed to deliver the goods with her portrayal as Galadriel, the Queen of the Elves. Ian Holm as Bilbo Baggins managed to be quite lovable as he's always been. Lawrence McElwire cuts an intimidating and strong presence as both the Witch King of Angmar and Gothmog, even thanks to Craig Parker using his guttural voice to make Gothmog a thoroughly intimidating character. Thomas Robbins' portrayal of the ill-fated Deagle was one that was so full of interest and engagement to the point where I felt so sad for Deagle in terms of what happened to him, even though he himself was also seduced by the ring's awesome power. And Bruce Spence as the Mouth of Sauron was a thoroughly intimidating and thoroughly terrifying presence. Therefore, all the actors did an amazing job, and they did so with great elan and excellence. What more can I say about The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King? Sure, some viewers might find fault with some of the moments being a bit underwhelming, or some moments being a bit rushed, or being a bit too much to stomach for nearly 4 hours. But other than that, I still love this film with all my heart. I still love how much tension, action, excitement, and thrills there was. I loved how everything managed to wrap up exceedingly well, and I could easily forgive all of those flaws that are otherwise nitpicks, because at least what's so important about The Return of the King is the execution. And Peter Jackson, his crew, and all the stars managed to accomplish every bit of the execution with excellence and outstanding superbness that I was thoroughly engaged from beginning to end. And you know darn well what I'm gonna give The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. A well-deserved 5 out of 5 stars. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What? You're still gonna give this a perfect score, even though you kind of made clear that there were some minor faults here and there? Come on, are you kidding me? Shouldn't this be at least a 4.5 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5? Hear me out, folks. Please hear me out. I know that there were some minor flaws to be found, but I could easily forgive all those. I could easily look at those as nothing more than insignificant nitpicks to an otherwise great and awesome film that managed to execute everything with excellent timing, as well as a whole lot of tension and thrills that managed to leave me on the edge of my seat. And everything about The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, managed to radiate with excellence and glory to the point where I was thoroughly engaged with everything occurring on screen and everything that managed to happen to the characters, for better or for worse. Therefore, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, as well as the entirety of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, managed to radiate with gold medal standards galore, and do so with A pluses all around. And for those of you who watched The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, what did you think of it? Did you feel like this was the best film that you have watched back in 2003? And did you also feel that this was the best film that 2003 had to offer? Did you also feel that this film was not only the best of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but also the best piece of work that J.R.R. Tolkien had to offer, let alone something that was adapted by Peter Jackson and his crew? Was there a moment that you really enjoyed, whether it be the final moments or those tender moments that some of the characters had, or even the more intimate moments that some of the select characters had? Was there a moment that you didn't particularly enjoy? Or did you feel like this film was too overhyped for your liking? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my review of the third Lord of the Rings movie, The Return of the King. Tune in next time for my review of Verdi's Macbeth, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, starring Thomas Lehmann as Macbeth. So until then, have a great Thanksgiving month, everybody, and may you all thrive and live and love in a whole lot of prosperity and abundance. I am totally thankful to have you all coming into my channel and viewing my content, and I'm thankful for all the support that you've been giving me thus far during my 13-year tenure as an online content creator. Take care and have a great Thanksgiving month, everybody.